A person from the audience asked a great question to a speaker. I have family members who claim that they're saved, but they have sin in their lives. How do I deal with them? The speaker looked pretty grim as he laid out his answer to that question, and then he concluded his answer by saying that these people probably don't know Jesus and have never been born again. Is it that simple to disqualify people and judge them as unsaved because of sin? Let's talk about this. This is a very important question. No doubt sin is heartbreaking to all of us because we've seen it and we know full well that the consequences of sin are always horrible and bad. But we're all forced to deal with sin all the time. Don't you know this in your own life right now? That in your family, you, like that questioner, probably have people who are in sin. And probably in your own church, there are people who are just not behaving like believers in Jesus should behave. And if you're a pastor, probably this drives you a little crazy. We know, we understand. But now, a little closer to home, couldn't we all admit that sometimes we don't even do the right things? Is sin the reason that a person's salvation should be questioned? Well, this speaker in his answer made it clear that he can just categorize who's saved and who's not based on the amount of sin in their lives. I don't think you can do that if you focus on the Bible, because here's what we find. Life is messy. People are messy. Church is sometimes messy. Even the Bible, which is telling completely true stories, tells those stories warts and all. Those stories in the Bible are sometimes messy. Here's what I mean. Abraham was doing just great, wasn't he? Until they were going into town, and he turns to his wife and says, honey, let's not tell him you're my wife. Let's say that you're my sister, because essentially Abraham didn't want to have to fight for his wife. That's messy. And Moses, he was doing just great until he killed that Egyptian with a witness. And David was doing great till he went up on the roof of the palace when he should be out fighting a war, and he saw the naked neighbor lady. And the story then just brings tears to our eyes and a lump in our throat and a knot in our gut. It's messy, and we have to accept that. Here's what the speaker was missing in that sanctimonious, frankly, answer that he gave. He's missing the fact that there is a prodigal. There is a believer who is carnal. We have a story of the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15. Let's focus on this as we look at the Bible today. Luke 15 and verse number 11, Jesus brings the story. And he said, a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And so there it is. He's taking a far journey now. We don't want him to do it. Everything in us screams, don't do this. This will make it all messy. But there goes that son. He left a perfectly good father and a perfectly good farm, and now wastes it all, and this is heartbreaking to us. Well, in time, the son realizes what a horrible game he's playing. Verse number 14 says, and when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. Okay, here's the heartbreak of carnality. He's wasted it all now. He has nothing in himself, and no one is there to help him. Thank God this is where it comes to for those who live as prodigals. But this son is a thinking man, and he considers his position now. Verse 17 says, "And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants." And so there was the plan of the prodigal. And then he acted it out. And he arose, verse 20, and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran, and fell on his neck, and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found. And they began to be merry. Is that good? What a great, happy ending. But here's the truth. That son, on his lowest point, on his worst day in that far journey, was still a son. He still has a father who loves him. And he has a father whose love is so great, whose compassion is so full, that he must have been out there watching down the road to see the return of his son. He saw that boy from far off and just went to running. Robes a-flying and flip-flops a-flopping. There goes the father down the road to hug that son and welcome him home. Is that good? Is that good? But make no mistake, that son is not a son by well-doing. That son is not still a son because he's doing well. He wasn't. He's a son because of the love of the Father. He's a son because of the goodness of the Father. And so in that rests our salvation. It's in the goodness of the Father. It's in the grace that bought us in the beginning. There is a prodigal. He's in the family of God. He's not doing well. But thank God, by God's grace, by rich mercy and great love, he's still a son, although he's a prodigal son. And so the speaker was missing something here. He's missing the prodigal in the family. And God the Father loves his kids, and God the Father never casts out a child based on the child's behavior. The speaker in his answer said these people must be unsaved because they're not bearing fruit. But isn't there a living plant that is not a fruit-bearing plant? And what's the problem here? The problem is in the growth. The problem is in the roots. The problem is something that we can tend to. Maybe the child needs better feeding. But the worst thing we could do for the prodigal is throw him down the well, to call him unsaved, to get him looking at his own deeds to try and justify him before God. But didn't we learn that our righteousnesses are like filthy rags? The brother of that son in the end of this story really makes it messy again. He won't receive his brother. He won't even go into the party. But aren't we on the edge of becoming like that legalistic brother when we throw the prodigal who's trying to come home down the well? Now, I'm not saying that every prodigal knows Jesus as their Savior. That's not a judgment that I can make. I don't think anybody could make that judgment by fruit inspecting. But what I know is this. If there is a prodigal who is actually lost, he's not lost because of bad behavior, because we all from time to time do bad behavior, don't we? Shocking things. Things that just bother us at the end of the day. How could I have done that? I'm a child of God growing. I was doing so well. How did I do that today? Our stories too can be messy in those moments, From one child of God to another, what is different is degrees. It's just degrees. We all need God's grace. But if there is a prodigal who actually has believed in Jesus Christ, friend, that sacrifice took, and that birth happened, and the growth part might be messy, but God help us to be believers who reach to those fallen brothers who have not fallen away from God's love and His salvation, but they've fallen from their steadfastness. They are like Paul's Demas, who having loved this present world departed, the Apostle Paul. But grace is still grace and love is still love. And if that prodigal would only come home, he would be so quickly restored, not to salvation, but to fellowship with God the Father and the family of God. Friend, today, are you thankful for God's grace? I can tell you I am, because I know without God's grace, there I go. Another modern day prodigal probably. We can't trust ourselves to always do the right thing. And God help us to not ever believe that our salvation hangs on our latest wonderful righteous deed that we accomplished. God help us to understand that we need His grace day by day, moment by moment. Sin tempts us all, and there's a devil on the loose. We are not mightier than he is. He tricked David. He tricked Solomon too. He tricks the wealthy and the prosperous. He tricks those that we would never think they could fall. And every year it seems that a major name is busted in some sin that is so disappointing. But let's not let our disappointment fuel what we believe and teach in the gospel message of Jesus Christ. We have to be forced to deal with sin because it's all around us. Listen, 1 John chapter 1 and verse 8 says, if we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. Now, that doesn't mean the truth has never been in us. What it means is that in the moment that we say, I don't have any sin, oh, we are so sanctimonious, so self-righteous, looking down our long spiritual nose at someone that we think is lesser than we are. But buddy, we better take heed lest we fall. We need God's grace, friend. And we need to come down off our high horse if that's where we are and recognize the fact that there is a prodigal, and that prodigal needs help by God's grace.